The most effective cure in the Middle Ages, according to the wisdom of the day, for pretty much everything that ailed you, from convulsions and fever to poisoning, was a simple powder mixed into a drink or sprinkled directly on the tongue. That miracle remedy? The ground up horn of a unicorn.
Daddy wasn't finding a pow wow. Daddy wasn't finding a pow wow. I love my little cat. I'm very fond of that. I'd rather have a big bow wow 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 wow.
Hello, and welcome to the Mochiverse. I'm Linette.
Yes, and I'm Skip.
Hello, Skip. What's up?
How you doing?
I'm doing. So you're still Skip, right?
Uh, you know, yeah, let me check. Wait, yep, okay, I'm still Skip. Yep.
Still Skip. So thank goodness for the unicorn, right? Pretty lucky it was discovered and saved our ancestors from everything, including the plague. But because without the unicorn, we wouldn't be here today. In fact, the Scottish were pretty convinced too, because the unicorn is still the national animal of Scotland. I mean, they were grateful for its help, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hi everyone. So today we're continuing our little medicine series with I think a really good one. We're going to talk about some of the bizarre things that used to be cures. And I just want to say there's really a wealth of information on this one. I think we're just going to scratch the surface of it, but it's okay. We could totally revisit again for sure. Since we know that all we have to do for that scratch is apply some crushed snails with some flour dust from a wall near a flour mill. We're going to be fun. It's this was actually really fun to research. There is so much stuff. I mean, you could go into a huge rabbit hole with this. I'm sure you went into a mini rabbit hole, but I just went absolutely bananas with this.
It can be this way. Yep.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So I guess we should just dive in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Dad, you had a few gems from your research to start off, right?
Yeah. Arsenic and
Oh yeah, good old arsenic.
yeah, arsenic. Yeah, this it goes back for centuries. Pretty much, it was thought that it was a cure for everything.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, Hippocrates,
Yep, that's right. Hippocrates.
Aristotle,
Yep.
Pliny the Elder, Galton, all recommended it as a cure for ulcers.
Those are all the big hitters, by the way, in
All the big
medicine.
hitters, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And it was also thought to cure the plague.
Oh, we'll get into
Uh,
that later.
oh yeah, I mean, think about this now. It was used for eczema, fevers, anxiety, high blood pressure, and heartburn. What's the point of having all the meds if you can just take some arsenic?
Yeah, just take some
Uh,
arsenic. What could go wrong?
yeah, yeah, and yeah, used for medicine to cure cancers.
Yep,
Okay,
it
yep,
actually is. Yeah, they're
yep,
using it
it
now.
is. Yep.
Yep.
Uh, yeah,
You,
just they use it as a
you're
pigment. Yeah, pigment.
you're gonna skip over syphilis in the notes, aren't you?
Absolutely. Also, yeah, okay, I'm going to go back to it. Also, very famously used for syphilis. Thought to
There
be
you
the ultimate
go.
cure for that for a long time. Al Capone could have used that.
That's
Um,
true. That's true.
yeah,
I mean, he probably could have used some arsenic for lots of different reasons.
yeah, 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 yeah. Unfortunately, someone would up the dose on him.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe just that one day that the banjo got a little too annoying.
yep, yep.
Well, someday we're going to do an episode on Al Capone, I guess. There's a lot of cool little bits, mostly from his prison time.
I had heard this before about it being used as a pigment or a dye
Yeah.
because at one time it was green was a very popular figure thought to be, to show someone being elite or rich that they could have
Yes.
a green garment, and they used the arsenic to make that green color.
Yes, and it was a very particular shade of green. It was a really rich green.
Mhm.
And this was sort of, I believe it was during Victorian times. It was
Yeah,
really popular to have a lot of color and there was a lot of clutter in Victorian times, but color was a big thing. And wallpapers in particular, there was there was this one guy who had developed this particular shade of green that just went crazy in the market. And it was very heavily laced with arsenic. And that, you know how like wallpaper salesmen would have like a big book of
Yep.
samples?
Hmm.
That book of samples is in, I believe it's in a museum in the UK. Uh, but it's behind like protective glass and only certain people are able to use it. And you're really not supposed to turn certain of the pages because the dust can actually still be harmful from the arsenic that's in it. It's pretty crazy.
Well, the thing is they could have produced, although they wouldn't have had it been able to be controlled that well, but you could produce a green, with some humidity and mold. You
Yeah.
get your mold that way, but obviously that it's not consistent, so.
Yeah, it kind of be bluishy, greenishy. I mean,
Yep.
and I'm sure I think they used copper for that too.
Yep.
But of course, copper in high levels can be toxic and it's also expensive. So who
Yep.
knows?
Yeah. So as I think we all know from the history of arsenic, that it's used as a poison.
Yes,
It was during the Renaissance, they called it an inheritance powder.
which I love.
Uh, yeah, I know, it's used to poison family members to get their inheritance.
Yep, inheritance powder. That's it. That makes it sound, that's like Desert Shield. It's just like put a nicer name, put like a slightly friendlier name on it. It
Yep. Yep.
sounds less
So,
bad. Yeah,
yeah,
so arsenic, very good, very good.
very good. Yeah. Yeah. And bloodletting, this is one of your favorite ones.
Oh yeah. Well, because it goes back to the four humors thing. This we should probably do an episode just on the four humors because it's like it's simple and complicated all at the same time. It's really silly. But yeah, the four humors, obviously we talked about it before. Basically, your body has four different humors. Blood, black bile, yellow bile, and phlegm. And all of those four humors have to be in harmony. And when they're out of harmony, you need to restore the balance. And there's many things that they could use to restore the balance. But if they thought you had too much blood and that's what was causing your fever, well, take out some of your blood. Do that. So with bloodletting, I don't know if you've ever seen the device that they used to use. I mean, of course, they used to use just like a scalpel
The-
or a knife or a pin or whatever it is, just to, and they used to use leeches. They still
Mhm.
use leeches.
Yeah.
But there's this device called a scarificator. Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't.
I would very much encourage you to Google it. And I would encourage everybody listening to Google it. It is a gnarly thing. So it's basically like it's brass and it's like square, it's like a little square device with like a button on the top. And on the bottom is like a series of blades, like maybe like 10 blades all in a row. And it works kind of like, the lancing device that you
Yeah,
would use
just
to
like
check your
that's what I
blood
was.
sugar, where it's like spring loaded. Yes. So instead of having just a little pin that would prick your finger when you press the button and the spring activates, this is like you put it up against their wrist and you press the button and all of the razors shoot out on the spring loaded thing and they just make 10 clean cuts on their arm. And then you put a bowl under that and they just bleed for a while. It's really gnarly. But they made them so fancy and pretty. Because they were like probably treasured tools in a doctor's kit, because bloodletting was like, let's do this. This is the number one thing. Yeah,
Yeah, and they could charge more for it.
they could definitely charge more for it. Yes. Bloodletting it was their mainstay. It was like, well, something's wrong with you. Let's bleed you first and see what that does. It's kind of like if I have something wrong with me, I'll either put a heating pad on or I'll take an ibuprofen. There's like that go-to thing. Well, not feeling too good, take an ibuprofen. Yep, that worked. Bloodletting was just like, I don't know if I could. I would never, not that I go to the doctor very often, but I would never go to the doctor in the Middle Ages. um George Washington died as a result of bloodletting, among other weird things that they did to him. We should probably do an episode about George Washington's death someday because it really was wacky. Did you ever read the story of
No,
how
I
he
didn't.
died?
No, no.
Yeah, the short version of it was he had like a respiratory thing, a minor respiratory thing.
Mhm.
And of course they were very concerned he's the president and all that. But they used bloodletting. They were burning spots on his arm. They were like making blisters on him. They were doing all this terrible, terrible stuff. And he ended up dying because of the treatments. It just really reminds me of like exorcisms where they end up killing the person, like they die of starvation or the beatings that they give them while they're doing the exorcism.
Cure is worse than a disease. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
Hmm.
Um, but they do still use leeches. Leeches can be really useful for like hematomas, which is like a big bubble of just
Right.
blood that's like, and a hematoma can be dangerous, especially if it's in like the brain or if it's pushing against certain organs or if it's interfering with your blood flow. Like even if you had like a hematoma like on your leg or whatever, it can cause restriction of blood flow because it can get so big that it like constricts like your blood vessels. And once you start to lose blood flow, you could like lose your leg. So yeah, bloodletting could be useful in that case. And they do still sometimes use leeches, although it would be much more efficient to just sort of draw it out a different way. But
Which is
I don't
probably
know.
what they would do now. So,
Yeah, and when they do use leeches, they use basically farmed leeches. They breed them in like a
mhm.
lab and they're sterile and they're, healthy. They don't just like go out in the field and to the pond and grab a couple of leeches or anything. Like they just they send Will Wheaton into the river. Okay, so what was your next one?
Chloroform. Now it's
Yes.
interesting. Before I go into this chloroform, you see a lot in movies. They put a rag over somebody's face. The
Yeah.
reality is,
Hmm.
doing that, it's not as instantaneous as they make it.
No, it's complete bullshit. It takes like minutes.
It takes minutes, maybe 5, 10 minutes for it to take effect. And
Yeah.
it's not practical. Obviously, the movie wouldn't have enough time to show that. And
Yeah.
the person would probably escape at that point,
Oh
So
yeah. Oh yeah. Because
yeah.
you're like, oh, here, hold still while I
Yeah,
put this
wait a
on
minute.
your
We're
face.
gonna, yeah, we're gonna chloroform you. Okay, there you go. And that's like, and it's the same. Although I'm not sure if it's not instantaneous as when they shove a needle into somebody's neck and they pass out within seconds.
Oh yeah, no, no, that's not.
That that I don't think is accurate either. Uh, but I have no medical background to substantiate that one way or another.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of medical bullshit in movies. Let's just say it that way.
That's well, we know that we can do that someday too.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. So, anyways, so that starts me out. It's a lazy movie trope.
Yeah.
It's instead of four big burly men holding on a patient so the surgeon can operate on them. Uh, this is what they use the chloroform for. But I bet you still have to hold somebody down. And I flash to having one of you kids, and I'm not going to say which one of you is getting a spinal thing and having a big burly guy holding you down so they can do this shot.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
Actually, wait, was that me? Because I remember
Yes,
I
it
had
was.
one
Yeah.
spinal tap. Yeah, but wasn't I like super little?
Oh, yeah. You were a baby.
Oh, but I
You.
was just
Yeah.
wiggly.
Oh, yeah. Wiggly. That's the whole thing. It couldn't get you to stay still, and this big guy holds you down.
I'm glad I don't remember that.
Yeah, that was that time. And then when you had your job as a baby, we talked about that once before.
Oh, when I threw up on thing.
Well, yeah, because
Because they kept saying mama.
yeah, well, that's what it was. It was like at MIT or something. They had this thing where they paid you to do this. They were doing this study, and they had the baby in a crib like thing, and they keep saying mama, mama, daddy, daddy, whatever, and to see how the kid reacted. And I think when they were doing mama, mama, I think he threw up. But anyway,
We won't go into the
no, we
psychology
won't.
of
No,
that.
yeah. Anyway,
So you literally sold me for medical experiments.
that's right,
That's
exactly.
yeah.
Well, your mother did. She
Oh,
needed
okay,
some
okay.
cigarette money. Yep.
That's
Did I say that?
clarification.
Yeah.
That's clarification right there. Shout out to my mom.
Hey, Ma. Okay. Anyway, and I'm just making a joke of it, but that's it was a paid thing anyway.
That's funny.
And chloroform was used in dental procedures and
Hmm.
childbirth. actually, was it Queen Victoria used it
Yep.
during the birth of two of her children.
Yeah, she wasn't fond of childbirth. Actually, she wasn't fond of her children. She didn't
Hmm.
like being pregnant. She didn't like having children. She didn't like raising children. She literally just wanted to hang out with her husband. That was her ideal. But she's like, well, I
Yeah,
guess I'll have, and she had like 9 of them. So
I think that as you realize, it's not unusual that some women want to be knocked out,
yeah.
and there's others say, I want to feel the pain so I can enjoy it. What are you thinking? Anyway.
Yeah, well, everybody has their birth plan. They
Well,
they
no, they
you need to
do. They
respect it.
do, and just stay out of the way. You'll get your face ripped off when they're going through it. Ether, they used ether,
Right.
and they switched to ether when they discovered the chloroform was could cause a cardiac arrhythmia.
Yeah, so ether was around first before chloroform, but they
Hmm.
thought ether was too dangerous, which it is. I mean,
Right.
it's dangerous too. But then they thought, oh, chloroform is so much safer. But then they
Yeah.
discovered after using it on people and having them die on the table that actually ether is probably a little safer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's amazing. This stuff here is ether is used as a solvent today, and
Oh, chloroform is, yeah.
yeah, yep, it's used in the manufacture of Teflon. It's pesticides and fire extinguishers. Yeah, and as I said, I went from the start. To go back to what I said about the bad guy holding a cloth over your face. It
Oh,
just
yeah.
doesn't. It just doesn't. It's not instantaneous like they make it seem.
No, no,
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's fun.
Yeah,
Chloroform.
that's fun. So now here's your favorite.
Yes. Dead mouse paste. So this is where it gets fun because
Yeah.
there's a ton of weird, just gross, and usually animal goo based like remedies and cures. So dead mouse paste, which is exactly what you think it is. It's like crushed up dead mice made into a paste. It was used as a pain reliever for the skin. So any kind of injury, you just mash up a little mousey and you apply it as a poultice. And you can imagine this is a very old cure because they don't,
Mhm.
as far as I know, they don't do that kind of thing anymore unless you have like an older sibling who, like for instance, an older sibling that might make their younger sibling eat ants covered in chocolate because
That's right.
chocolate covered ants. Yeah. I don't know anybody who went through that, but
No,
somebody might
nobody.
have at some
Yeah.
point. I'm just making it up completely out of my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the dead mouse paste was a big thing in ancient Egypt. In ancient Egypt, they got a lot of things right, right? I mean, beer and wine, you know. There's a lot to be said about their eyeliner game. They're very good with
Mhm.
the makeup and the perfume and their whole aesthetic, their look. I'm not so sure about the dead mouse thing as a great advancement, but you could definitely see a lot of things like that in ancient times. In fact, the Romans, I don't know if you remember watching the series Rome because it was a long time ago now, but there is one scene where I don't know, the mother is talking to her son and he's being angsty because he's a teenager and she's like, "You haven't eaten your mouse heart."
Ah, okay.
Like apparently eating a raw mouse heart was good for something. I did a
Um,
little research. I could not find what it was good for. I know that bird hearts were used for gout. There's another movie that I really liked called Vatel. It was about a chef, one of the earlier chefs. He was actually like in charge of the entire estate. And it was a famous story where, I think it was Louis XIV was coming for a visit to the estate. And so this party had to be perfect. And Vatel went all out on the food and the entertainment, and he was in charge of the whole thing. And I guess the fish delivery was like late. So he ended up falling on his sword as a result. But Vatel in that movie, the gentleman of the house had a really bad case of gout, and they had to keep killing birds because he had to apply their hearts to his feet. And
ah,
yeah, and they ran out of birds. So I think they had to kill like his pet parrot or something. It was terrible.
yeah. Wow. How many birds do you have to kill if somebody's got a size 12 foot? Never mind.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and since it didn't work because it doesn't work because you can't treat gout with bird hearts, they just
Yeah.
had to. They wasted a lot of birds.
Mm.
So yeah, gross stuff like that. Horse saliva,
Yeah.
human or animal excrement. Excrement was a big thing. So the other thing about the four humors and about the whole theory before germ theory and things like that, one of the things they really encouraged, besides bloodletting and puking and pooping, was putrefaction, basically, or pus, right? They thought that was a good sign. And it kind of sort of is. Like if your body's like got all these white blood cells trying to solve the problem of your infection, it
Right.
creates pus, but you're really not supposed to like keep that around. And so they would use poop a lot because they knew that it would make it worse and grosser and more infected, and lots of pus would happen. And that was considered a good thing. That was considered the cure. So pretty nasty. I mean, they didn't know about sepsis back in those days. They just thought, hey, look, it's doing this really disgusting thing. That's got to be working. So yeah, poop. Same with lizard blood, mud, and a good one, moldy bread, which they were
Moldy
getting
bread.
so they were so close.
Yeah, they were. They were, you know.
So close to the penicillin
Yep, yep.
thing.
They didn't know it. Yep.
Just a few centuries early, I think. So, do you want to do this one or do you want me to do this one?
I had never heard of this, a whale hotel.
Yeah, it's great. It's so great. So, guys, don't Google whale hotel unless you're looking for a vacation by the seaside or unless you want to be grossed out. So, the whale hotel. Okay, so this is the late 1800s in Australia.
Mhm.
And this was touted as a great new cure for rheumatism. Appeared in magazines and newspapers at the time. So it's really easy. All you need to do is find a whale carcass, probably a fresh one because the old ones tend to explode if you leave them too long on the beach. And there's video of that somewhere on YouTube. Then you just get inside, like Luke Skywalker, you know, he was inside the thing, and you just chill there for 30 hours. Um, And the idea apparently was that the decomposing blubber that surrounded you while you were sleeping inside there was a great poultice for your rheumatism. So,
You know, it's probably not too far from Vaseline.
right, right, because it's an oil.
Yeah, because
Uh,
the oil, I mean, because they used to use whale blubber, fuel for lanterns and stuff. So it's probably not that far removed.
I feel like you wouldn't, I feel like, okay. So let's just say you determined that whale blubber was really good for rheumatism. Is it really necessary to go inside it and close yourself in and wrap yourself in the insides of a whale? Could you just maybe, take a knife and cut out some of the blubber and just like
Yeah, I
put
I
it on you?
agree. It's pretty extreme, but someone didn't think that through, obviously.
Also, the resources probably a bit limited. I can imagine that cure is not easy to come by unless, I mean, 1800s, maybe we probably had a lot more whales back then because we weren't killing all of them yet.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just to some extent there'd be, if you're protecting yourself from the weather, okay, get yourself inside a dead animal, okay, but I'm
Yeah.
still not sure I'd go to that extreme myself. But this I'm not in the 1800s either, so
No, no. Just inside the whale. I thought they smelled bad on the outside.
yeah. Listen, I'm going to be in the whale for a while.
Yeah, I'm going to my whale hotel.
Going to my whale
Um,
hotel.
hold my calls.
That's right. And if I don't wake up by a certain time, come and get me.
They're like, I'm not coming and getting you. Like, that thing's gonna explode.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, what if the whale hotel explodes?
Well, that's what would happen. Yeah,
Right. Well,
exactly.
actually, you've cut it open. The reason why a whale carcass explodes is because of, decomposition is starting and all the bloating and everything, all the gases that build up.
Yep.
So if you've cut it open, that's not going to happen. So
No, expose it
you're
to air.
safe.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you're safe. You're not going to explode in the whale hotel. So you know what? Like, check it out, try it, see if it works. Maybe go on TripAdvisor and write a Yelp review of it. And let's, maybe get this whale hotel thing back started.
Go for a search for dead whales. Okay. All
So
right. So you got this frog juice thing. What is this all about?
that was yours. You put that in there and then I
Did I
researched it.
really?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
Okay,
wow.
frog juice. So the first thing I think of when I think of frog juice is like it sounds like, you go to like a Southern cookout and they have like the drink, like the fruit punch drink.
Mhm.
But I think that's bug juice. But to me, that sounds like a thing. Um, Shout out to all of our Southern listeners. You're not wrong about that. So yeah, I guess frog juice is good for anemia, bronchitis, bones, brain, fatigue, and stress. It's listed online as a traditional cure in Peru. And actually, some of the articles that I read say they're still using it. There's some controversy because they're using endangered frogs,
Mm,
and so that's a
okay.
concern. And just to clarify, like, especially because this is a cure that's still being used, I don't want you guys to think that like we're dissing the practices and beliefs of other cultures. Not at all. But I mean, it's frog juice. It's just an interesting, it's interesting that it's used in that way to me.
Well, it's funny, it's not really funny, but there was a discussion the other day. I think that one of the neighbors has gastro problems,
Mm,
and the doctor was saying to drink pickle juice to relieve it. Now,
hmm. I mean, that's good for electrolytes.
well, pickle juice is acidic, and if you're having a
Okay.
gastro problem, acid's your enemy. So I don't see that there's any scientific evidence that that would work because it defies it. It defies the logic of what causes esophagus problems, which is the acid from your stomach. So
Right.
if you're gonna drink something acidic, I would think it would just exacerbate the situation. I mean,
That's
I'm sure there
interesting.
I did some research on it, and there's no scientific evidence that would work at all. And but even if it does work, it seems to me that it can't work for everybody. And to me, it's like anytime I hear somebody say something that defies my common sense of my logic about it, it makes me think that there's something that they're not telling me about what the condition is or what the situation is. They're
Right.
leaving out this little detail that explains it in a way that says that can say to me, and not that I'm a big expert, that can say to me that okay, that makes sense. When my brain says I don't see how it makes sense.
The only thing I can think of is that if it's depending on the pickles, if they're fermented, because fermentation can be good for a lot of GI issues because of the probiotic aspect. But
Yeah,
you don't
except
have to drink pickle juice. You can take probiotics or eat some yogurt, which can also be acidic, but it helps.
I hear what you're saying,
Yeah.
but the problem with that thinking is that you leave out one thing
Mm.
is this it's all pasteurized. And what does pasteurization do?
Yeah. Well, it kills off the
Okay.
bacteria. Well, it depends on whether they are pasteurized.
Right. But my point is
Yeah.
typically it is pasteurized. And if you
Yeah.
buy pickle juice all by itself, it's
Oh, yeah. That's not going
pasteurized.
to be, yeah. Unless
Yeah,
they
it's
make it specifically as a probiotic thing,
right.
they're going to be pasteurized. Yeah.
Right.
Don't
Yeah.
do it.
Don't do it. That's my bottom line is don't do it. So
We're not medical professionals.
now if you said anemia, okay, there could be some iron in there to help you out. But
Well, hydration, surely.
yeah, so there are specific things that it would help you for. But the logic, and listen, the other thing pickle juice has been used for is for hangovers.
Right.
Very effective for hangovers.
Right. But that's because of the dehydration thing. So,
And also it's some salts that goes
yeah,
on there. Okay.
right. If you can hydrate, if so electrolytes help your
Right.
body hydrate itself.
Right.
If you're drinking a lot, I don't drink at all, but whatever. But if you're drinking a lot before you go to bed, if you either drink like water, which is
Mhm.
good, but if you drink like either Pedialyte or like a Gatorade type of drink or like
Yeah.
a electrolyte drink, it can ease your hangover symptoms that you're going to get in the morning. So
Yeah, and so listen, that is something that has been proven is that
yeah.
it's the pickle juice for hangovers. Although my brain says it just grosses you out enough to say, man, I'm not going to drink anymore. So
Well, yeah, and it's because I'm not a drinker, I don't understand a lot of those aspects of
Yeah.
hangover cures because most hangover cures look disgusting, including like if you feel like shit in the morning and you don't know if you're going to hurl or not. All these people are going and getting like greasy cheeseburgers in the morning and
Oh yeah.
stuff, and that helps them. I'm like, what is I understand that if you eat greasy foods before you drink,
Yeah.
it's better for your digestion and it's better for the metabolism and everything like that. But like, I'm not waking up and wanting a cheeseburger if I'm hungover and feeling sick. No.
Yeah, I think that the hangover aspect, you get, I mean, I get that a lot of folks will do the drinking and stuff, and that's it. It's not to criticize that part of it. It's just not for
Oh
me.
no. No,
But
drink if you want to drink.
yep,
I don't judge drinkers.
yep,
I just don't want hangovers.
that's right. The hangover, yeah, and getting sick is just not very appealing. Anyway,
No.
so we've
Anyway, yeah,
digressed a little bit there on that one.
I know.
So
I'll probably cut half of it out. Don't
yeah,
worry about it.
yeah. No, no, that's fine. I think digressing is a good thing. So
I like it. Some people
yeah,
don't like it, but you know what? Since none of you have ever like sent us a review or made comments, like you're just gonna keep hearing it until you say something.
that's right.
So,
He
and then
said,
probably
cut
after,
out that di yeah, okay.
yeah, I'm gonna be honest. Even after you say something, I'm probably still gonna do it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just my style. So yeah, so there've been some weird cures throughout history. Like I said, there's so much information on it. You can find just about any disgusting substance and it can be used as a cure for something over the years, whether it's ancient, whether it's, you know, even a little more what we would think of as modern times. It's really just because it took a long time for science and medicine to figure out, like the human body, how it works, properties of all the elements of nature around us, how they can relate. There's a lot of trial and error. There was a lot of philosophy behind it though. Like these weren't just like stupid people looking around going, I'm gonna put some like dog shit on my on my guts. Like they had a reason for it, and the reason was science based at the time because they were thinking, well, if this, then this, and they were going by what they thought was true at the time, which is fine. There's another whole part of ancient medicine which was known as like curing like, which I touched on in a previous episode,
Yeah.
especially with plants, things like that. And you'll see a lot of plants that have weird names, even still. This kind of wort and this kind of weed and this kind of bane and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of it has to do with what it was used for. There's something called lungwort, and
Mhm.
it was used for the lungs. And there were plants that look like all different things. They figured if it looks like the thing it looks like a liver, that's probably good for your liver. It looks like a
Yeah.
kidney, it's probably good for your kidneys. Like they weren't just out of nowhere with this, but it is, to us it seems strange because we're like, I can't believe you thought that. Like, okay, there's plenty of things that I thought when I was like younger that I don't think anymore because I learned something new, and you can expand that to the knowledge of humans. So it's fine.
Yeah, it's just, and it is my brain flashed and I talked about it earlier, mentioned it earlier about Vaseline and how that came about,
Right, right.
where people when they were doing the oil rigs and they the effect of the pistons going back and forth, and they used to lubricate them. There would be this grease, and this I can't remember his name, but a gentleman
Yes.
just saw that these uh, people in the oil fields were using this grease on their cuts and stuff.
Yeah.
Uh,
Probably happened
and
accidentally once, and
yep,
they were like, "Oh, that feels better." So,
yep, and that's how from that they derived Vaseline. Anyway,
yep. That's my same thing about mushrooms. Like it fascinates me how there are so many like poisonous mushrooms out there,
mhm,
and there are lots of edible mushrooms out there, and somebody had to figure that shit out the hard way.
right,
you know
yeah.
and it's just like, look at that thing, let's eat it. Like I just love that. I really like the human spirit.
Yeah.
I'm like Doctor Who. It's just like, oh, these humans are so weird and strange and kind of stupid most of the time, but I just so fascinated by them.
Well, if you think about, it's funny, your brain, I know my brain works like this sometimes, is that every once in a while I'll look at a certain food or a berry or something like that. And I said, how did somebody figure out that this would be good to
Yeah.
eat? They took a chance.
They
And
did. It's like when you take French fries and you put them in the Wendy's, what is the Frosty. If you dip your French fries in your Wendy's Frosty, it tastes really good. Somebody did that.
yeah, yeah,
You know, potato chips and ice cream, potato chips and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Come on, that's
yeah,
perfection.
yeah. Yeah, and this just obviously it's how it's worked and how things progress along the way. Although eating kale doesn't seem to me like something you'd do just
Right?
because it tastes good.
It's literally roughage.
Yeah,
I I have I have gotten better about the kale situation because I know
yeah,
it's good for me. If
yeah,
it's chopped up really small and mixed in with other greens, I can do it.
yeah,
And cooked with like lots of garlic
yeah,
and olive oil and things
yeah.
like that.
It's like anything else. You put enough garlic or enough sugar on something, it'll come out tasting good.
Yeah, exactly. Just
Yeah.
like, Mary Poppins
Mm.
with their spoonful of sugar.
Yeah, makes the medicine
Coming.
go down. Yep,
Exactly. See, she knew what
yep,
she was talking about.
yep,
She's not doing like a spoonful of frog juice or anything. She's doing a
yep.
spoonful of sugar. She
That's
knows.
right.
The next part, I'm just turning it into an entire segment because it's pretty big.
Oh
Um,
yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's pretty big. So the Middle Ages. So the Middle Ages, they had a rough time,
yeah,
specifically with a little thing called the plague. The plague was also Black Death, bubonic plague. It was just terrible, and it ran for centuries. It was always around. It was always killing everybody. Like the plague killed so many people. It was a huge, huge thing. So, and it makes sense logically that a huge phenomenon like a plague would send scientists and doctors scrambling for answers, right? Everyone's dying. Whole families, entire villages, they're just wiped out by this nastiness. Almost no one was untouched, even rich people. So once the rich people get involved, the doctors and scientists are like, we better fix this. The rich people are dying.
yeah.
Uh,
Mhm.
so if we ever do an episode specifically on the plague, we could.
Yep.
Yeah, there was a group of people. I will talk about this in a few minutes. There was a group of people who were specifically seemingly untouched by the plague, and it didn't go well for them. So it was
Yeah.
quickly blamed on them and their cats. But that's coming. That's coming soon. So cures for the plague. Okay, so there's a wealth of information on this, and I just picked a few. The big ones. The first one is pretty easy. Vinegar. We just talked about pickle juice,
Yep.
and vinegar is very useful for a lot of things, and it's been around for a very long time. But doctors felt at this time that a mix of vinegar and garlic with spices and herbs would help with the plague. And, and to me, it just sounds like a nice salad dressing. But
Mhm.
there was a specific mixture that was known. This is a good story, actually. It was known as Four Thieves vinegar. It comes from this legend that these four thieves used to sort of ransack houses of families who had died from the plague, take all their belongings, and they would carry this vinegar with them to protect them from the plague because they felt that it was a protective. And none of these thieves died of the plague. So it became a thing that everybody believed in, and it was widely used. Also during this time, and actually most of time until germ theory, it was widely believed that diseases were brought on by what was called miasma, which just translates into bad air. So bad air, bad smells. So if something smelled bad, then it was probably dangerous for you.
Right.
And that was the part of the disease that was going to get you was the air from it, the smell from it. And there are airborne diseases, so they weren't wrong about that exactly. But it really wasn't the smell that was to blame. So a lot of these cures that were smell based came from the idea that if you have something that smells either strong or nice, it'll ward off the miasma. So it's there's a little bit of logic there, like I said. So you get some strong smelling vinegar, some nice tasty smelling herbs, bingo bango, you're good. You're not going to get I almost said flu. Yeah, but this was the plague. It's a little more serious. um, so also good for the plague because of miasma were onions rubbed on the armpits. So pretty much like, I don't know, it's just like an 11-year-old. Discovered deodorant yet. Specifically on they were called buboes or buboes. So the bubonic plague. was called that because these really nasty, like they were like cysty, kind of welty, kind of
Mhm.
just disgusting balls of just disease that would appear on the body, very painful, and they were like black. And they said, you look at that, you say, well, that's what the disease is right there. So let's put something on that. And they would put the onions on that to try and cure it by getting rid of the miasma part. But actually, onions do have some compounds in them that can be therapeutic. So maybe a couple of people got lucky from that. Bouquets of flowers, because they smell nice. And so if something smells nice, it's going to ward off the bad smells. Of course, bloodletting.
Of
Bloodletting is always
course.
a thing. Yep. Get rid of the blood. You have too much blood because the plague is it gives you too much blood and bloodletting. And if they die, well, they died just like everybody else died. So that must not have been it. Let's try it on the next person. Um, so this one is my absolute favorite. I don't know if have you ever heard of this method before? I know I alluded to it a couple times in earlier episodes, but
I never heard of it. Yeah.
this is amazing. Okay, so this was called the Vickery method, and it was a cure for the plague. Okay, so here we go. So you take a live chicken.
Okay.
Stay with me. This isn't a Ray Stevens song. Does anybody know? Do you know that song? Because that song I know. It's me. It's me again, Margaret. Hello, is this
Uh,
Margaret?
yeah, no, I don't. I don't. It doesn't jump out at my brain right now. So,
It was of pretty much my generation. Ray Stevens, he did
oh, I
like the
remember Ray
song The
Stevens.
Street.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So he did this one song called It's Me Again, Margaret. And he's playing an obscene phone caller. And this woman keeps getting obscene phone calls from this guy who's like, It's me again, Margaret. And he's like breathing into the phone. And he finally gets arrested. And at the end of the song, he's like, he has one phone call because he was arrested. And so he calls Margaret and he's
Uh,
like, he's like, it's me again, Margaret. And he says,
uh,
when I get out of there, I'm gonna come over there with a weed eater and a live chicken and some Cool Whip. So that's Ray Stevens for you. So anyway, so you take this chicken, right? And it's a live chicken. So let's remember this for a moment. You pluck the chicken, the living chicken, but not the whole chicken. First of all, don't pluck a live chicken. That's terrible.
how do you hold them down anyway?
And it hurts. Can you imagine just somebody
Yeah.
ripping out all of your hairs and from the bulb and oh Jesus, it's awful. So, all right, so you pluck the chicken. You don't pluck the whole chicken though. You just pluck the butt area of the chicken. So, seriously, while the poor chicken is alive, I just want to repeat that just for clarity. You pluck the chicken's ass while it's still alive. And then so the reason for this is that go ahead. Did you have a
My
question?
my
Do
my
you,
vis my visual to this. I'm sitting here shaking my head.
Oh, good. Yeah. So, okay, medieval doctors thought that chickens breathe through their butts. And, this they were medieval. They can't be blamed for not knowing things. Everybody knows with our modern technology and our modern knowledge that only dads can do that. Anyway, chickens breathe out of their butts. So, you take the freshly plucked butt chicken and you strap it to your leg, preferably like if you have a big infected bubo on your leg.
Yeah.
And the idea is that the chicken breathing through its butt will draw out all the poisons and the bad things and all that stuff from your disease. And then the chicken will take it. And then now, if the chicken dies, you just get another chicken and you repeat the process and do that again. If the patient dies, well, you don't need the cure anymore.
Okay.
So that's the Vickery method. No word on the I didn't get the numbers on how effective it was. But they totally did it. So yeah, the Vickery method is my favorite. Other kind of similar things. The snakes weren't so lucky as the chickens. Snakes don't really have butts, so they didn't breathe through their butt. So what they did was they chopped up a snake and you strap it to the buboes because snakes were considered like evil, it would draw out the evil of the disease.
Yep.
Um, that's that's pretty bad. And snakes as a cure go back to ancient China. One of these days we'll talk about snake oil, and that literally is the origin of that. But yeah, so stay tuned for that. Poop, of course, as we talked about earlier. You mix up some poop with some ground lily root and tree sap and put it right on the open sore, and it'll get infected and fester, which, as I said earlier, it's believed that the pus being formed is a good sign. It's a sign of healing, part of the body's process to try and heal itself, sending all those white blood cells, whatever. I mean, I guess they were close with that, but it really doesn't, that's not a good idea. They
I
didn't
would
know
think
about
not.
sepsis again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
This one I'm just gonna breeze by real quick because I don't want to get too involved, but flagellation. You're Catholic, you know what flagellation is,
Yep.
right? Yeah. So basically, I mean, understandably, this was a long time ago, and the plague was thought to be a punishment from God. I mean, anything bad that happened to you was considered a punishment from God. So if you punish yourself, it's supposed to act as penance and maybe you'll be forgiven. So, like, these people would walk down the streets just basically whipping themselves
Yep.
in order to cure the plague. And they probably would, volunteer to whip others as well.
Okay. Is that how you whip yourself into a frenzy?
Yes, yes. You whip yourself into forgiveness. Yes.
Yeah.
Again, I don't listen, I'm not going to judge like ancient, sort of religious practices, but maybe it'll work. Who's to say? I try not to flagellate myself whenever I mess up. I do usually just call myself an idiot, and that's my penance. Okay, so unicorn horn. This was from the top of our episode. This was used as a cure by the very wealthy because unicorn horn is kind of rare and hard to get, right? Because, like, you know, they're unicorns. Okay, so most of the time, unicorn horn was actually just ground up rhinoceros horns or ivory, or the horn was just like a tooth from a narwhal, which not that easy to get either in medieval times, I imagine. But maybe there were more narwhals around, or it could have actually been ground up unicorn. I mean, we weren't there. Maybe they hunted them to extinction and they really were a thing. Maybe Shel Silverstein was right and they didn't get on the ark, but somehow survived the flood. I mean, you and I can't really say we weren't there.
I
So
wasn't there. It was
no,
before
so
my
maybe it
time.
really was unicorn. Unicorn horn. It was considered a cure for everything, including poison. So it was like that stuff was considered the perfect cure, but very, very, very expensive. Yeah. So also expensive emeralds. So you take some
Okay.
emeralds, you have a bunch of emeralds, laying
Oh,
around.
oh, sure. In back, yeah, I keep them, keep a whole
Y-
stack of them. Yeah.
Yeah, you put some in your pocket. You have, like, because you have your car emeralds and your work emeralds and your home emeralds, right? You have to have like some in each one, like your chapstick, right? You have your emeralds
Yeah.
that you don't want to lose track of. Yeah, it's like that. So you have a bunch of those and you crush them up and drink them. Again, not for everybody, but listen, if we don't keep the rich healthy, we'll all be screwed, right?
That's right.
So
Just ask them. Yeah.
just ask them. Yeah, exactly. That's what they say. What's that trickle down thing
Yep.
that you all used to say back in the 80s?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So for those who couldn't afford emeralds, you could just write the word abracadabra on a piece of paper and carry it with you. Like, I'm not even kidding. That was during the plague. Now, listen, if you're a woman in the Middle Ages, I would probably advise against carrying a magic word around with you. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
probably not a good idea to have any magic things if you're a woman. They got some men too, and then just stay away from magic in the Middle Ages. It's not going to go well for you. Okay, so nutritional advice in the Middle Ages was really no different than now. So some experts said that vegetables were good for warding off plague. Some said that vegetables were bad and you should stay away from them. Some promoted alcohol. Others said it was a great way to die of the plague. Eggs were good or bad. So was milk. Um, no word on green coffee bean extract or ashwagandha, but Dr. Oz was still a few centuries away. But it's it is funny because it just reminds me of like, especially in the 80s. Oh my gosh. You could watch anything in the 80s or read anything in the 80s without being really confused about what was good for you and what was bad for you.
Oh yeah.
Coffee, eggs, chocolate.
Yep.
Don't do it, you'll die instantly. Or no, you need to have this like twice a day. Like,
Yeah, and usually, this theories were developed with very no medical or very little medical evidence. And someone one day, like you said, one day coffee's bad, next day coffee's good. One day eggs are bad, next day eggs are good. So it's no different nowadays than it was back then. So
no, yeah, no. And part of the problem nowadays with that is that when I say nowadays, I am talking about the 80s. Like,
yep,
sorry, I'm old. What had happened was, you would have a study, and the study would say, let's find out if this is good for you.
right,
But then they would want to publish their study, and then they would want to promote their study, and then the media would get a hold of the study, and the media would read like the first line of it and say, this just in, coffee's bad for you. This just in, coffee's good for you. They wouldn't read it. They wouldn't tell you any details. They would
right,
just say, a study, a study suggests. And the average Joe watching the news or reading the newspaper isn't going to be like, oh, a study suggests this. Let me look into the documentation of that and see
yep,
what it actually has to say. I mean, how many participants were in this study, and what were
right,
the actual results, and what were the percentages, and what was it double blind, or was there
yeah,
some bias involved? Was it self-reported data, or was it actually a legitimate, in good faith study? Was it peer reviewed? Nobody says that except
no.
for me and people on podcasts. Also me.
Well, yeah, I mean that's what makes people skeptical of the studies, and what you have to nowadays. What you have to look at is as we get a little more sophisticated in terms of analyzing when they do blood work and stuff, where you can just say, okay, this the cholesterol is bad, cholesterol is good, and
Right.
then you look back at what you've been eating and what you've been drinking, and that's how you get the data. Uh, yeah, it just you know you really look at yourself, and unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, everybody's different.
Everybody is different, and it's very easy to scare people. I mean,
Yep,
you listen, you're a really intelligent person who reads things and
yep,
you analyze things and you research stuff, but still, when you had that blood sugar monitor on there, you were still like, I have to drink orange juice right now. The numbers are low, right?
yeah,
Because
I
it's like
know.
scaring you.
It's
So sometimes the information that you get, if it's incomplete, or if
yep,
you're not sure what the origin of it is, it can just cause a panic instead of actually doing any good. So
that's right. Yep,
there's that whole thing. But yeah,
yep,
so the plague was a lovely time.
yep.
Uh, okay, Bezoar stones or Bezor. Do you know what a Bezor is?
No,
Before you read the notes.
yeah,
So
now I
what a
do. But
yeah, now I do. So what a Bezor is like, so you certain animals that have like, the multiple stomachs, like ruminating animals, they can have this mass that forms. Because like what happens when like a cow or like a goat or are sheep ruminants? I think so. You're eating like grass and it goes from one stomach to the other stomach because it moves back and forth with different parts of digestion. And
mhm,
there's different processes that go on and different chemical reactions that go on. So sometimes the food, when it's passing from one side to the other, it can kind of stick together and it can form a mass over time. And it turns into this really hard, like stone of just like material. Like it could be there could be minerals present in it, but it's mostly like food stuff and all this kind of stuff. But it gets like really hard. People can get it too if you have a disorder where you compulsively eat your hair. Like I used to chew on my hair when I was a kid,
yeah,
when my hair was long. If you chew on your hair too much, you end up swallowing too much hair. It can cause a little you can get like a hairball in your stomach. And a bezoar is kind of like a hairball, except it's like really, really compacted and it's like food material and all kinds of other material all stuck together, turns into a stone. And eventually they would just like cough those up or whatever. So in medieval times, they thought that bezoars were magical. They had magical properties. They thought that they could cure poisons and illnesses. So if you ever watched Harry Potter, I think it was Ron, he was poisoned, and they gave him a bezoar stone to swallow. And I know I'm saying it both ways. I don't know how it's really supposed to be pronounced. They gave him one to swallow, and it cured him of his poisoning.
Okay.
Because it was supposedly thought of as a magical object in medieval times. So very interesting. So they use those. And while we're on stones, I'm going to gross you out for a couple minutes. I've talked about this before, but there's this thing called is it antimony or antimony? What do you think?
I think antimony.
Antimony. Okay, we'll go with that. So part of the four humors thing, as we talked about before, was bloodletting. Yes, but there were other ways of getting the bad stuff out of you, or getting you have too much of your black bile or your yellow bile or your phlegm or your blood. And that was purging, and purging, either puking or pooping. So a lot of cures that related to the four humors were meant to make you either puke or give you diarrhea. And one of those was, and what did we say? And antimony.
Antimony, yeah.
So this was a stone, and it's a, I can't remember what the elements of it are, but it is toxic, this stone. It has like these mild toxins that emit out of it. And what you would do is you swallow the stone, and it would either make you puke or poop. So, but the great thing about this lovely stone, besides that it restored your humors and cured your diseases, is that you could fish it out and reuse it afterwards. So it was really economical. You could lend it to your neighbor if you're nice, or pass it down in your will, or give it in your dowry, your daughter's dowry. So
Okay.
yeah, which like I never, you didn't put that in my dowry.
No,
I
I
didn't
did
have.
not. No.
No, I'm
I
kind of disappointed. Actually, I didn't have a dowry, did I? You're just like, listen, you take her, that's what you get.
that, that,
Yeah, so that's, and listen, cures in the medieval times were not pretty, as you know. So I know we had to get into that for a moment. But so this one's a little more pleasant, a little creepy, but more pleasant. The plague doctor mask. Have you seen pictures of those?
no. So, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The
The
huge
one that looks like,
protruding beak. Yeah.
yes, it looks like a huge, like almost like a prehistoric bird with a big, huge beak sticking out the front and huge eyes and stuff. It's really creepy looking. And they literally used to wear these when they were visiting sick houses, thinking it would protect them, because the beak, you would put like something to ward off the miasma inside, whether it was like an essential oil or flowers or herbs or like, onions, garlic, whatever it was that you put in there. Put some of that vinegar in there,
Yeah.
some of that Four Thieves vinegar, and it would keep the miasma at bay. And as we know, those plague doctor masks became popular again after 2020 with COVID. Lot of plague doctor masks at Halloween that year. But they were thought of as a legitimate protection against plague. There's really no word about how much that helped. Just tons of people died of the plague. They also tried killing all the cats. So I don't want to get too far into this. I think I'm gonna take my notes and cut them just a little bit. So they noticed that a lot of Jewish households who lived a little bit on the fringes didn't seem to get plague as much in their villages, in their areas. And so the real reason was that Jewish, by tradition, their families, they were really into cleanliness. They really felt it was important. Different aspects of cleanliness was part of their religion. And cleanliness and hygiene weren't really a huge thing in medieval times for most people. And so they did live on the fringes of society. There were prejudices, and they really weren't around enough people because they were living on the fringes of society. So they weren't getting disease. They weren't getting the disease as much. They weren't getting plague as much, and people noticed. And they were thinking, well, if you don't have the plague, you caused the plague.
Yeah.
That's what happened. That was the logic. And so they also noticed that a lot of Jewish families had cats, because back in medieval times, the Jewish families noticed that if they had a lot of cats around their property, they had a lot less rats, and rats were dirty and gross and ate your grain, and it wasn't good to have them around. And so, and they seemed to cause sickness. They noticed that because they were observant people. So, unfortunately, the rest of the medieval villagers would look at this situation and think, okay, first of all, the Jews did it, and second of all, it's the cats. So they tried killing all the cats, and what they didn't know was that it was actually the rats or the fleas that were on the rats that was causing the plague. So when you took away all the cats, you had more rats, and it got worse. So thanks for that. Yeah, so plague, a lot of their stuff didn't work. So many people died of it. It was just, I mean, it took out just huge swaths of societies, and entire villages were just shut down. You could, you can imagine if you tried to travel, you didn't know what you were going to get when you got there. And it wasn't, I mean, everybody was susceptible. And, obviously it's a comedy movie, but that whole bring out your dead scene from Holy Grail, it was absolutely accurate. That entire scene where just the way it looked, where this people just wrestling in the mud, just putting mud in their baskets to try to have it, just taking filth off the ground, just completely dirty and messy and all this kind of stuff. And a guy walking down the street with a cart full of corpses, hitting his little cowbell and singing out, "Bring out your dead," was literally something that did happen during plague times. It wasn't even a joke.
Yep.
Now the whole part about John Cleese trying to put his grandpa on there or whatever, maybe not so accurate, or his dad, who knows who that was. And then of course the next line where Arthur kind of trots by with his coconuts and he says, "Oh, he must be a king." John Cleese says, "Why do you think that?" And he says, "Because he hasn't got shit all over him." That part was true.
Yep.
Very accurate movie, by the way. Very
Yep.
factually accurate.
Yep.
But anyway, yeah, so plague was a really, really horrible time. And plague, by the way, not to scare you, still exists. The
Yep.
bubonic plague can still be transmitted. You can still get it. But the good thing about that is that it's very easily cured by simple antibiotics. Like I think penicillin can still take care of it.
Yep.
So that's a good thing. That ought to brighten your day. So yeah, so diseases and cures, weird cures. Wonder if we should probably do another episode specifically on that, but I think we're going to keep going with our medical thing. If you guys get a chance, if you can go onto Apple Podcasts, I don't know if you use Apple Podcasts for your actual listening, but if you can go on to Apple Podcasts and shoot us a review, hopefully like a good review, like a 5-star review would be really nice, but make a comment on there. It would actually help get us more visible to others. People can search for us if there's reviews on the show. So, like a nice one would be nice. And of course, you can always send us an email at mochiverse@gmail.com. That's MOCCIAVERSE@gmail.com. Email us comments, suggestions, miracle cures, what have you. Let us know if we missed any cures, especially for plague. And we probably did. There's like a million of them out there. And that's it. But speaking of brightening our day, I know it'll brighten your day to tell me some
Yeah.
dad jokes
Yeah. And today, the
today.
special of today is animal dad jokes.
Oh, Anna. Oh, there's a theme.
Is a theme.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Give it to me. I love it.
Okay. What is the cutest creature in the sea?
What?
A cuttlefish.
Aw.
What do you do, or what do you call an elephant in a telephone booth?
What?
Stuck.
Okay.
The man walked into the bar with the parrot on his shoulder. The bartender said, "Does the animal talk?" And the parrot replied, "I don't know."
That's good.
What do you get when you cross a parrot with a caterpillar?
Mm-hmm.
A little walkie-talkie.
Oh, lucky donkey.
Why did the chicken cross the playground?
Why?
To get to the other slide.
Oh my God, that's a good one. I like
Yeah.
that. I've never heard that one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, what do you call a deer with no eyes?
Oh, no idea.
No idea, yeah.
No idea.
Yeah. What do you call a fish with no eyes? Pony walks into a noisy bar and tries to order a beer. The bartender says, I can't hear you. You have to speak up. Pony says, sorry, I'm a little hoarse. Okay.
Yeah.
Why did the chicken cross the road?
Why?
To show the possum it could be done.
Oh, that's dark.
Yeah, it's very dark. Yeah. And why aren't dogs allowed in bars? Because they can't control their liquor.
That's good. All right.
Yeah.
Wow,
Okay.
those are some good ones. All right,
Yeah.
folks, we will see you in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
Daddy wasn't finding a powwow. Daddy wasn't finding a powwow. I've got a little cat. I'm very fond of that. I'd rather have a big
What I said. Hold on.
Yeah.
I knew it wouldn't last long.
Yeah, that lasted all of 1 minute.
He heard something out there and he goes to the door.
Yep, got to check it out.
Yep. Anyway.
That's fine. That's what editing is for.
Yep.
I'm getting good at it.
Yep.